Hello, and welcome back to the I'm Moving to Italy podcast. This is Nathan Heinrich, and you're listening to episode 4. Thank you so much for coming back and joining us again for our 4th week. I'm so excited to have you here. Our audience continues to grow, not only in size, but also in demographics. It's so amazing for me to be able to see that we have listeners from the 18 to 23 year category all the way up to the over 60 category and everything in between. We have a pretty good mix of men and women listening. I feel grateful, humbled, and so happy that you're all here listening. Every single one of you that reaches out, I just want you to know that that means the world to me. The fact that you keep coming back week after week, anyone that you tell about the show, they start listening, any of that, all of that, it means so much. So thank you. I'm going to let you know that there is a little dog across the street. And I have restarted this intro about 3 times already. He keeps barking. I may just let him bark, and if you guys can hear it through the microphone, then so be it. One thing I wanted to just really briefly touch on with you all. When I started this podcast, I really wasn't sure what it would take, really, how much time it would take. I certainly underestimated how much time it would take. Everything from building the notes that I kind of build throughout the week to capturing the sounds to really figuring out what I'm going to say and making sure it doesn't just sound like gibberish, but it's got some sort of a coherent stream of consciousness. But also there's a lot of other work behind the scenes that it takes. And one of the things I've discovered is that a show has about 8 weeks to kind of prove itself, a new show. And in that 8 weeks, platforms like Apple and Google and Spotify and Amazon, they kind of track to see how the listeners to the show are responding to it. One thing that I would love for you all to do, if you have the time and if you're enjoying the show, if you could, on whatever platform you are listening to this on, if you could review the show, I would love a 5-star review if you'd like to do that. If you leave a review, what that does is that really shows the platform. Apple is basically the biggest one, but there's also Spotify, which is really big. Any of them, they all kind of share information in this kind of crazy way, because there's this feed that's called the RSS feed, and that is sort of held in one place, and they all kind of share information off of that. So if you're enjoying the show and you'd like to leave a review on the platform, then that would be fantastic. Also, I wanted to just really briefly just mention one other thing here before we get into the show. I do not plan on, nor do I at this point need to bring on advertisers. A lot of shows I know have advertisers. It sort of pays for the show. I've committed to at least 1 full year for this show, and I'm going to sort of amend that commitment by adding to that I'm going to also make sure that I don't bring advertisers onto this show for the first year either. I just think it's unnecessary at this point, and I think it gets in the way and it takes time away from what we want to do here. We are all bombarded with advertisements all the time, and so who needs that? And in the future, if I ever do use advertising on any platforms, it's only going to be things that I'm already using or things that I actually want to use. I'm not going to just, anybody that tries to throw a little bit of money at me, I'm not going to just try to, hawk their goods. There's nothing more grating and irritating than having to listen to somebody try to force something on you. So that's not what we're ever going to be doing here. So anyway, all right. One thing I want to talk about is, I mentioned that I'm getting a lot of really great feedback. 99% of my feedback is really positive. So I just want you to know that that's wonderful, and appreciative of that. Maybe this family member was right. Maybe I shouldn't have shared that. Maybe I shouldn't have, maybe I shouldn't be doing any of this. Maybe this is all just too personal, because it certainly is the most public I've ever been anywhere in my life about my personal life. I've never shared any of this stuff. So you all are getting really a front row seat to my real life, which is something I have never done before. And it is every single time I sit down and share something, it certainly doesn't seem like much to you listening. I'm sure it's no big deal. It never feels like very much when you're listening to someone else tell their story. No matter how much they've crashed and burned in life, it's never so hard to listen as it is to tell. It's definitely an exercise in me pushing myself past my comfort zone. But it's also difficult for those who really love and care about me to hear me talking about things that they've never heard me share, or never expected me to share, probably. And then I got something that just brought me right back and just made me realize, no, Nathan, you're going with your instinct here. You're doing exactly what you should be doing. You're doing exactly what you felt was right. Trust your instinct. Trust your gut on this. And I had a really wonderful listen. This was just, I think the day after I had got that negative comment from a family member, I got this little sort of anecdote, this little story from this listener in Santa Barbara, California, which is basically one of my favorite places in California. And what he said was, Nathan, I loved your last episode so much. And when you told the story about you climbing under that bed, I was outside in my yard listening to your podcast, and I was laughing so hard I snorted, and then the neighbor heard me laugh and, cracking up, and then he started laughing. And that was something that I really needed to hear. I mean, that's a ripple effect. And these are people I didn't know. These are people that found the podcast, totally organically found the podcast on their own. And so that is the sort of thing that is keeping me going. You are keeping me going by listening, and by the feedback that you give. I want you to know I care. I care what every one of you shares. So thank you. Thank you to that listener. You know who you are. Thank you. And thank you also to the family member who said something too, because you know what? I know that where you were coming from was a place of love, and that is appreciated as well. So anyway, I think I may have mentioned in the past week or two that we have been kind of moving in and out of tier yellow and into tier orange. Well, anyway, now we're back into tier yellow, which means we've been able to go out and look at properties. We've been going out looking at houses. We've only seen 3 houses so far, but I'm excited about that. By next week, I will have some images, some video clips to show you of some properties that we've looked at here. And I'm getting very excited about that, because the house that we buy here in the Prosecco Valley, the northern part of Italy here, the house here is going to be a house that we don't use a lot. It's gonna primarily be a vacation rental. So as I continue to tell you all about this area and how much I'm in love with it, which I am just falling more and more in love with it all the time. I've been falling in love with it for the past several years of coming here to visit, and it is just incredible. It is just beautiful. So there will be pictures. I will share with the process of it with you. Anything that we buy, I really love the idea of buying something that needs a little bit of TLC, that's kind of special, that needs a little bit of, polishing up and some renovating. So I'm going to be sharing that process with you here, of course, on the podcast. And I am going to be opening up that house that we purchase here as probably an Airbnb, because that's what I know how to use. I know how to use that service really well. I learned how to do that in California first, and then in New York. So it's going to be an Airbnb rental, and yeah, you guys will be able to, any of you who are listening to this, you will be able to certainly get, any of my listeners will get a discount for, to be able to stay there, but that's all in the future. But the point is, the house hunting has commenced. It's in the very early stages, and I'm excited to share not only the house hunting process with you, but the house purchasing process, and then the renovating process. And I don't know about you guys, but one thing I love to do, and I've loved to do for a long time, and it's something that's happened everywhere I've lived. In California, I had my favorite vintage and secondhand shop, or furniture shop, or estate sale shop, or whatever, people call them different things everywhere. It's not so much of an antique shop. Antique shops, I find, as much as I love to shop in antique shops, they are overpriced, usually. They have great stuff, but they're overpriced. And when I was in New York, oh man, I found the most wonderful little place across the Hudson River in Tarrytown, New York, a little place called the Cherry Door that was just my absolute favorite place. It supported all the proceeds. Everyone who worked there was a volunteer, except for Dominique, who was the proprietor. Him and I became good friends. He's a gentleman from France who is just, he got to know me very well because I was always in there buying stuff. But it supported one of the local hospitals. And so you would go in there and you would just find, beautiful pieces of art. I'm a sucker for an amazing oil painting. Oh man, I collected some wonderful oil paintings from the Cherry Door in New York. And the prices were just incredibly low, and you got just the coolest stuff with the greatest stories. And anyway, and sometimes the stuff didn't come with any story at all, and you just had to imagine up where it had come from. Well, since I have moved here, I have discovered a place that is basically the same sort of thing, but it's a business, and they sell everything from shoes and clothing and fur coats, like vintage fur coats, to paintings and to dishes, to antique furniture. And they've got a whole warehouse full of furniture. They've got lighting that comes out of people's houses, chandeliers of all different sizes and shapes. They've got pots and pans. I went and bought a big pot to make some stew and some soups here. And I mean, I basically am there every week, and I've already kind of filled up our house that we're renting here for a few months. I've already got probably about 6 or 7 oil paintings that I have fallen in love with and had to go back and couldn't wait. But I mean, if you are buying an oil painting for €20 that is framed and that is beautiful, I mean, if you were going to just pay for the frame alone, you would not be able to buy a frame for €24, or in some cases €15. Some cases more. Some cases, you're spending €100 on something, on a really wonderful painting. But because because we're looking for a house, I'm not buying furniture because the house we're in right now is furnished, and so I wouldn't have anywhere to put it yet. But the oil paintings, they don't take up a lot of room, and it's not just oil paintings. It could be a watercolor or something. But I'm kind of a sucker for just a good piece of art. And I mean, I'm looking at 3 right now as I'm recording this, and I love them, and they're beautifully done. And that's one thing I want to share with you guys on this channel. It's a little challenging to share the visuals, but because I'm building a website, and because for the show, and because we have the social media account, the Instagram account, I'm able to kind of walk. So I'm going to share some in the future. I'm going to share some videos of me walking through and what this fantastic place is like. And the deals, oh man, the deals. I mean, you couldn't even go to IKEA and buy a brand new piece of art or a piece of furniture for the price that you can buy some of these pieces that are so beautifully made and so beautifully painted and crafted, and the sets of dishware. Oh man, this place, I am going to furnish the entire northern Italian house here out of this place and out of another place that I just found in the neighboring town. So excited about it. I love it. I love getting a piece of furniture that's a beautiful sofa or a chair and getting it reupholstered, or if it's in great condition as it is, just using it as it is. I love an eclectic mix of things. I don't like junk, but the good thing is most of the stuff that's at this one particular store that's my absolute favorite, the stuff isn't junk. It's really good quality stuff. And that's another thing I've noticed here is this country really does manufacture high quality goods. And some of the things like the pan that I bought, for example, wasn't produced here. It was produced in Germany. But in general, Europe tends to have pretty high standards of manufacturing. I'm sure many of you have heard that famous quote by Napoleon when he was insulting the British for being as he called it, a country of shopkeepers, which was supposed to be an insult to the British, because it was almost as though all they could do was have a shop, which, I guess he thought that you needed to have some other ambition in life besides being a shopkeeper, and whatever. But that was his big insult to Britain. Well, what I have noticed in moving to Italy is that Italy is also a country of shopkeepers, and I could not love it anymore if I tried. And when I say a country of shopkeepers, let me explain what I mean. Now, a lot of my listeners are from the United States, so you're going to understand, but I would imagine that even if you're in Australia or Canada or the UK or anywhere else in the world, but especially those very, very Western countries that have cultures kind of similar to each other, is that everything is tending towards, about 20 years ago, you started to see a rise in the box stores, the giant mega stores like Best Buy and Costco and Home Depot and Lowe's, and even like Target and Walmart. So that kind of began to push the smaller mom and pop shops kind of into a difficult place because they could not hardly compete. And then, to add insult to injury, then came Amazon onto the scene, and then Amazon took everything online. And so now people don't even necessarily want to go to these big box stores and go to the malls anymore. Malls are closing all over the United States, and everybody's saying retail is dead, and mom and pop shops can't, unless you're in an area like Carmel, California, or, somewhere very, very specialty where people don't mind spending a lot of money, like if you're in the Hamptons in New York or something like that. If you're in a pocket like West Palm Beach or something like that, that's really high end, and people don't care how much they spend, maybe you can survive there, even if your rent is really high. But across the United States, middle America, all over America, mom and pop shops, before the pandemic ever came, they were closing because they just couldn't compete with Amazon and the fact that people can buy things online and things are shipped to them immediately, same day, within a few days for free. There's just no way to compete against that. But what I have found about here in Italy, life here in Italy is very different. And let me give you an example of what I mean. So this is a town, Coniano, here in the Prosecco Valley. We are a town of about 12,000 residents. There are 3, at least that I've seen, 3 fruit and vegetable shops, specialty fruit and vegetable shops, which means you go there and you're basically, they have a few other items, like they have some juices and they have maybe some specialty pastas, but mainly they're selling fresh fruits and vegetables. Now there are countless grocery stores in this town too. I mean, I think that there's at least 6 grocery stores that I counted, and each one of those grocery stores sells produce. And then there's the Friday market that also comes in and sells, sells fish and produce and everything. But these adorable little shops that are just tiny are able to survive in a town of 12,000 residents. And the quality of the produce, not just because it's Italy and they grow their own produce, but the quality of the produce is just so incredible. So I was in one of those shops, 2 of those shops this past week, because even though I normally go to the grocery store and these shops are a little more expensive, I walked past and I saw these blood oranges and I just couldn't help myself. And I brought them home and cut them up, and we had those blood oranges, and oh my God, they were from Sicily. Some of the most delicious. I mean, you guys know I'm a sucker for a good citrus, right? But, these blood oranges that came from, they looked so perfect. And I don't really care how perfect a fruit looks, because in the United States, one of the things that people complain about, and I certainly don't like, is that a lot of the produce is bred, hybridized, and strains are developed so that they last on the shelves longer and they look really good, but the flavor is like the last thing that they're considering. What I've noticed here is that the fruit and vegetables do not last. These are varieties that taste good, but they also look beautiful too. It's just, I'm in heaven. So that's just one example of how this is a country of shopkeepers, and it's almost like going back 30 years in the United States when there were still little specialty shops all over the place. I just really hope that doesn't change about Italy. I'm sure there's going to be pressure on them to modernize, just like all the rest of the countries in the world are trying to do right now with the rise of Amazon. It is amazing. I had to go buy some stationery, and there's a shop that just sells school supplies here. And they sell backpacks and envelopes and letters and, letterhead and pencils and pens and erasers and just everything. And people, so a little girl came in while we were in the shop and bought a ruler for school, like at a tiny little shop that she walked to, I'm sure, from her house or from her school. And I just love that. I just love that people walk here, and I have my theories. I'm going to dig into why that is and why the culture is like that, as I continue with the show, but in a future episode. But I just love that that's the way it is. It's refreshing. It makes me so happy that a family or a mom and pop, literally a mom and pop. One of the shops I went into, and I asked if I could film. They said, yes, you can film, just don't film us. And they were very nice and laughing and smiling and everything. But they were filling their boxes and their bins with the fruit and organizing, and you could tell that it was a labor of love for them. And who knows how long they'd had it, but it was decorated beautifully, and there was ivy hanging from the window, and it was a big, huge window, and all their most colorful fruits were in the window. And it was just, I'm just loving the fact that it's feels like stepping back in time here. I could rave about the fruit and vegetable shops for hours, but I'm gonna move on. Anyway, I wanted to share that is what it's like here, and I'm going to continue to share new discoveries like that and and differences that I'm noticing because I'm so freshly from the United States. It's fabulous. I love it. Okay, so another thing that I've noticed while I've been out filming this week, I was out with my camera and I was in the square and I was waiting for the bells to ring and just capturing the little kids laughing and playing, and I'm watching the people walk through the square, and there were probably 100 people. It was a sunny day, and there were probably 100 people that walked in and out of the square in the 45 minutes that I was filming. And there was not a single person that I saw in that 45 minutes out of that 100 people or more, maybe even it was more, that was overweight or obese. Now, maybe a few kilos extra here and there, a few pounds extra here and there, but I didn't see a single person that was obese. For the most part, everyone from the children to the older adults, everybody was lean. And that's another difference I've noticed coming from the United States. You know, the United States is notoriously overweight as a population, and myself included. You know, I came here definitely overweight and have been dealing with weight issues for the last 10 years of my life, kind of fluctuating up and down. And so I've noticed a major difference in what the population is like here. You know, at least I think it's some terrible number, like over 50% of the population of the United States is overweight. And I know that is from, I would probably attribute that to three main things. Being a lifetime American, I can tell you that it's a lack of mobility, lack of movement, and things like Amazon, you don't even have to walk to your car to drive to a store to walk to the store anymore. I mean, you're not even leaving your house anymore. You're not even getting out of your house to go buy the food that's being delivered to you. It's literally being delivered to you and you eat it, or whatever. It's, you know, DoorDashed to you or Seamless to you, or Uber Eats delivered to you. I mean, it is incredible. So people don't move enough and people don't walk enough in the United States, whereas people here walk everywhere. The fast food and the unhealthy processed food in the United States is just out of control. And I will say one of my guilty pleasures in the United States is driving through someplace like In-N-Out or Taco Bell. I mean, man, there's nothing better than driving through Taco Bell and getting some tacos and burritos. And I don't do that often, but, you know, it's a guilty pleasure for sure. And Americans do it in vast numbers. Here, there is not a single drive-through in this town. There are 3 fruits and vegetable shops and not a single drive-through. What does that tell you? The food in the schools is good food. It's not pizzas and, you know, frozen, rewarmed chicken nuggets and things like that you have in American schools. I mean, here you're having real fruits and vegetables. You have real chefs preparing the food, or the mothers and fathers are sending the food with their children to have food, their own lunches that they take with them to school. And I would say that the third thing would be the fact that people here really cook at home. And it's interesting. One thing I've noticed about it, the layout of an Italian home. Italian homes have their kitchens separate from their living rooms. Americans are all about the open floor plan, you know, as our culture changed to people just spending a lot of time around the TV in the United States. And people watch TV here for sure, but the TV is not in the same room where people eat in Italy. People here eat in their dining rooms and their kitchens like they used to in the United States, 30 or 40 years ago, before people gathered around the TV to eat or could see the TV from their table, their dining room table. So people cook food here. They go out and buy their fresh ingredients that they need for 1 or 2 days, and then they go back out and buy more. And so people here are just constantly shopping for food. The frozen food section in Italian grocery stores is very small compared to the frozen food sections of stores in the United States. Everything here is fresh ingredients, very low processed amounts of food that people cook in their homes. And there certainly are restaurants here, and the restaurants have wonderful food, but and people, I'm sure there are a lot of people who eat at restaurants a lot when they're open. But anyway, I just noticed that, and I'm certainly not shaming anyone that's overweight. I'm currently overweight myself. I'm working on it. However, I have to tell you, I have lost weight since I've been here. The walking and the eating and the lack of any of real processed foods in my diet, and I am also making a green smoothie. All of these incredible, all this incredible produce and fruits and vegetables that are available here. I'm just blending into a wonderful green smoothie every day, and I'm having that. And so that's also part of so I've gone down 2 pant sizes since I've moved here. I'm so excited about that. I love that. So anyway, so that's something I've noticed, and something that kind of makes me sad about the United States. It's one thing when you are in it and you live in it and you just kind of get so accustomed to it that you just don't even really, we're going to get fast food again, or we're, pulling some frozen prepared thing out of the freezer and warming it up in the oven or the microwave. But you don't really think about it until you're in a place where it's so different that difference is such a stark difference that it makes you notice it. So I'm sharing my journey of getting healthy and weight loss and getting to where I want to be physically, where I look better and feel better. So I'm just simply sharing my process with you guys. I'm not putting anyone down that's overweight, because I know exactly how it feels, and I'm currently still there myself. So I'm just still trying to figure this all out myself. But I do have to say that the way the culture here is set up and it has not yet been hijacked to make it almost impossible not to become overweight. The way that the lifestyle is in the United States it is almost, you have to consciously go against the culture to make sure you're not overweight. Because if you're doing what the popular culture is doing, you're going to be in that overweight category, unfortunately. So these are just some interesting observations I've made since I've moved here. Another thing that I've noticed while I was out doing my filming and walking around the city is that, and it's not something I've noticed, something I knew before I came here, but it's something that just kind of hits me every time I'm out in public, is that this is probably the first time that Italy, since World War II, I would imagine, has had no tourists. I mean, that's World War II was it ended in the 1940s. I mean, now we're in the 20s of the next century. So, I mean, that's we're getting close to 100 years since there was a time when there were no tourists in Italy. And then this will probably be the last time in my lifetime that I'm in Italy for, a year with no tourists. And I know that tourism is going to start coming back on this year, probably later in the year. But man, I mean, what a strange time to be here. I kind of have to say, I feel like I'm in some sort of an exclusive little club almost. I mean, not to rub that in anyone's face. I know so many people who said we had planned a trip to Europe or a trip to Italy this year, and that's on hold now. I feel very, very privileged to be able to be here right now, and it's a very interesting time to be here with no tourists, because I can feel it. It's definitely incredible. I'm not a big fan of the city of Venice. It's not really my favorite city, primarily because it really is like the majority of the income that city receives is from tourists. And I think that I'm going to go as soon as we're able to travel there, because, when things open up just enough, I want to go and film there and capture some sights of that city on film without the tourists, because I know that it's going to be, I'm probably never going to see it like that again, ever, at any time of the year. Even during the winter months when it's less touristy, there still are tourists there, but right now there are none, zero. And I know it's hurting the economy so much. It's hurting the economy around the world. But like I've said previously, this country is a country that makes a lot of money on tourism. And so it's painful. I know that it's painful for everyone. But anyway, that's something I've noticed that's been really interesting. A quick update on the Italian classes that I told you guys in the last episode I was going to be taking. We went. I'm supposed to be waiting now for the instructor to call me so I can be tested, which, is the idea of getting tested on my Italian skills is just not something I'm looking forward to. I mentioned before that I'm using a language learning app on my phone, and it's definitely helping. And I've told you about watching TV and trying to read in Italian and practice Italian. I've got a friend here that I was introduced to by Alessandro Manuela, and she has been, we talk on the phone twice a week, and she studies her English with me. I study my Italian with her, and although her English is far superior to my Italian, so I feel bad for her for having to tolerate my absurd attempts at Italian. But anyway, so that will be hopefully in this next week. See, there's the American in me wanting to rush into it. I have no idea when the Italian lessons are going to start. I have no idea when the instructor is going to call me. But in the meantime, I'm continuing to study my Italian on my phone and on my computer, and we'll see what happens. So I don't know. So another observation that I've made since I've been here is that I find very interesting, and I always try to think about why. I ask the same questions about, the healthy lifestyle here, in comparison to the United States. Well, another thing I've noticed, another observation that I've made here, the windows on the houses have shutters on them. And there's two different styles of shutters. There's what we would consider as the more traditional style that close, and they're just, there's two, and they're vertical, and you pull them closed and latch them. And then there's another kind that's even more common, and those are the ones that are electronic, and they're built into the top of the windows, and it's like a system. And I've never seen it anywhere else in the world. But they literally have there's a switch on the wall, and you hit the down arrow on the switch, and this metal mechanized device, I don't really know what to call it. It's like a kind of an accordion metal curtain that's security proof. I mean, you couldn't break through it unless you had like a bulldozer. But it's, you couldn't even break through it with a massive sledgehammer. But it's this interesting system that closes down, and every evening around 7 o'clock or after dark, you will notice as you're walking around the city that you just hear shutters closing all over the place. You hear the shutters closing, either closing shut, slamming shut from the old-fashioned style that just close like two doors. But then you hear these ones that are coming down electronically. And Italians lock their house up. They close these shutters over their windows every night. That is something I am totally not used to. It's totally foreign to me. And I started thinking about why is it like that? Like what made that a cultural thing here, like a tradition? And I have a theory about it. And I've even run that theory past some of my Italian family members here, and they thought it was an interesting theory, and they think that it's just the way Italians are. They think that they think I could be right, but also they think Italians are just private people. But I think that it originated from the war years. During World War II, you had to put blackout curtains on the windows because and all the towns across Italy would turn all their lights off and basically become just blacked out so that airplanes flying over dropping bombs wouldn't be able to see where the cities were, through using lights. So they would have to do their bombing during the day, but they wouldn't be able to do their bombing at night. And I think that it may have happened during those years where, you just locked your house up at night to keep the light in, and so you didn't let any of the light out, but also just because it just kept your house safer too. And the United States has never had bombs dropped on it. There are a lot of countries in the world that have had to go through the horrors of war. But one thing, as I was thinking, the United States, we are a kind of a trusting country in a lot of ways. And I think it's because we don't have the cultural generational memory of war in our psyche. Now, granted, we have fought wars abroad. The United States, it could be definitely said that the United States was instrumental in saving the world and Europe from the Nazis and from communism and Hitler. And, thank goodness the United States got involved, but that was on foreign shores. That wasn't the United States fighting, and having to deal with bombs being dropped. Anyway, just something interesting that I've noticed. Okay, so I'd like to move on to our final segment, which is the surrounding sound segment, one of my favorites. Okay, so this week we have the sound of, surprise, surprise, the shutters closing. What it sounds like when the shutters close up for the night around here. I captured my neighbors closing up their houses. I was, out there filming them without them realizing it, but just their shutters, not them. So the sound of shutters closing. I brought with me a sack of California walnuts from my family's farm in California. And so there's a sound of me cracking some of those walnuts, which are the most wonderful walnuts in the world. And then there is a sound of me calling the Italian phone service that you call here. And it's very cheap to have an Italian phone number and phone line, but you have to call to check on your balance to see, you go to the little tobacceria shop and you add money to your phone. It's like a prepaid thing where you add money. And so you have to call and check on to see what your balance is. And so there's a sound of me calling the Italian phone service to see how much of a balance I have. And then there's a sound that's very interesting, and it might be kind of hard to hear, but there's very, very different bread in different regions here. And the bread that comes from the south, which is where Alessandro's from, the bread that comes from Napoli is very different bread than the bread that's up here in the north. The bread in the north, everybody says, after a day it becomes like a rock. And it really does get very hard and stale here after a day. But the bread that comes from southern Italy is dense and it is moist and it doesn't dry out like the bread up here does. And it sounds different when you cut it. And I thought, okay, I know this is crazy, but I'm going to try to capture the sound of what it sounds like to cut that bread. It kind of reminds me of like a really thick, like sourdough bread, but even more dense and more thick. So there's a sound of cutting some of that bread from Naples that's delivered up here. There's special carriers that bring up the the bufala mozzarella and the bread from the south. So that's been amazing. I'll talk about some of those in another episode. And then the final sound I have is me sitting in Alessandro's grandmother's kitchen. And like I said before, we call her Nonna because that's the Italian word for grandmother is Nonna. So sitting with Nonna in her kitchen and her telling me about life in Sicily where she grew up, and I think she had 9 brothers and sisters. So there was 10 of them. And she's talking to me about that and just talking to me very fast. And you might even hear me saying a few things like, my few things in response that I can say to her in my limited Italian. But anyway, so those are the surrounding sounds. So enjoy those, and I'll come back after and say goodbye.
Hai un credito residuo di 0 euro e 7 centesimi, aggiornato all'ultimo SMS inviato del 5 febbraio 2021 alle ore 19 e 35 minuti. I dati di SMS e i minuti residui, digita 1. Per avere informazioni sulla tua linea, digita 2. Per ricaricare, digita 3. Per conoscere nuove promozioni TIM e attivarle, digita 4. Per riascoltare i messaggi, digita cancelletto.
Che là facevano le stradali, le strade. E allora quindi là pigliavano la casa mutua, pigliavano l'assegno familiare, insomma pigliavano bello così.
Okay.
Però poi mano a mano si è comprato delle proprietà vicino al paese, perché noi la macchina non ce l'avevamo neanche.
Capito.
Quindi là lui quando veniva la sera diceva a mia mamma fammi trovare il mangiare pronto. Veniva a mangiare a casa e poi subito andava nella nostra terra e lui là metteva tutti gli ortaggi, fave, insomma tenevamo l'alberello di limone, insomma metteva fagiolini, pomodori, tutto questa roba là. Sì, 7 maschi e 3 femmine.
Sì.
La prima si è sposata e se n'è andata. Allora, poi io ero a mezzo e io sono rimasta, però io con tutto che tenevo mamma tutta questa famiglia e tenevo una cugina mia che faceva la sarta, allora io verso le 10:30 le lettere, il telefono, ci siamo sposati.
3 anni?
Sì.
Wow.
3 anni. Si scrivono sempre lettere e telefono. Però mio marito ogni 5 mesi veniva.
Sì. Un lettere per mese?
No, una ci mandava, quando me ne venuto da io poi aspettavo la sua. Poi mio marito da Napoli è venuto a Palermo, siamo sposati. Perché erano lettere fidanzati, insomma.
I hope you enjoyed those sounds from this week here in Italy, and I want to thank you again so much for being here. Thank you to those of you who have reviewed the show. Thank you in advance to any of those of you who are going to leave reviews for the podcast. Like I said before, it means so much, and it definitely helps the podcast tremendously to be able to do that. We've got another couple of weeks here to kind of boost this show up in the ranks, and so I appreciate so much your help in getting us to that goal. Any of you who are planning to either move here yourselves or come here to visit, I hope that you're able to come here very soon. I look forward to being back here with you next week for another episode. Take care. God bless. Ciao.